This is Mrs. Vance again. Another part of our unit on evolution is concerns the study of taxonomy, which is the study of classification. And so we're going to talk about why it's important to have a standardized classification system and how we go about identifying the parts of that classification system that we use today in biology. So there are some new terms that we'll use. Some of these you may have heard of before, and others, again, may be new to you. So we'll talk about each one of those as we come to them. So it's really important for us to have a universal classification system because it allows scientists to communicate worldwide about different kinds of organisms and know that they're talking about the same thing. The system we use today was first developed by a Swedish botanist named Carl Linnaeus back in the 1700s, I believe. And he came up with a system that's called a hierarchical classification system that's based around something called a scientific name. The scientific name is composed of the genus name and the species name. We'll talk about what genus and species mean in just a minute. But the system is called binomial nomenclature. Binomial means two names, and nomenclature is a system of naming. So basically binomial nomenclature means, in English, a two-name naming system. And so this is where we have things like our scientific name, like for humans, it's Homo sapiens. And that's the genus and species name of people. All right? The correct way to write this or type this is really important for us to understand. If you're writing it in handwriting or printing by hand, then when you always capitalize the genus name. You never capitalize the species name. And if you're writing it, both of those words need to be underlined. If you're typing, then you use italics for those. And again, you still capitalize the genus name, and you italicize both the genus and the species names. And that's how you correctly write a scientific name. Now, what exactly do genus and species mean? Well, let's look at an example here. This is our cougar. The scientific name for cougar is Puma concolor. Okay, the common name would be cougar, mountain lion, puma. Sometimes called there's certain kinds of panthers that are called they're like mountain lions as well. And so anyway, they're all the same species. They just have different names. Different common names. And that's why it's important to have a scientific name. We want scientists in Texas, who might call it a cougar, to know that they're talking about the same animal as scientists in California who would talk about a mountain lion. And so it just makes it convenient for us to know that we're talking about the same species instead of something entirely different. So here's an example of Linnaeus's classification scheme. Okay, it goes from very large groups called kingdoms to very small groups called species. Okay, and so we're going to look at these different kinds of animals here and look at how we can divide them out or classify them according to their scientific taxonomic categories. All right, the kingdom that we're looking at here is kingdom Animalia. That means all the members of this kingdom are animals. And so we have here grizzly bear, black bear, panda, red fox, a bear, squirrel, coral snake, and sea star, all of which are animals. Okay, we can break the kingdom down into several groups called phyla. A phylum is a group where they share some very important characteristics with other members of that group. So the phylum we're going to look at is phylum Chordata. Phylum Chordata members have a backbone and spinal cord and a couple of other characteristics that we'll talk about later on. And so all of the bears and the fox and the squirrel and the snake all have backbones, but a sea star does not. So that's going to eliminate sea star from that particular category. Sea stars belong to another category called Echinodermata. All right, now we're going to look at all of these animals, and we're going to look at the one that looks different. The one that looks different from the others is the snake. All the rest of them have hair and feed their young with milk, and they all belong to the class Mammalia because they're mammals. The snake belongs to class Reptilia, the reptiles. And so in our class Reptilia, we can look at all of those members. They're in class Mammalia, and we can see that all of these look pretty much the same. They all have hair and things like that, but they live in different ways and they have different characteristics. And so the one that doesn't fit there is the squirrel. Squirrels are rodents, and all the others are carnivores. And so we're going to put the 3 bears and the fox in the carnivores because they all are carnivores. And the abear squirrel is going to go into a different class, different order called rodentia, because there's a rodent like mice. In the carnivores, we have the 3 different kinds of bears and the fox. Well, the fox is the one that doesn't fit there. And so we're going to separate him out into family Canidae because he's a dog-like mammal. And we're going to put the bears together in family Ursidae, or the bears. When you look at the bears, the grizzly bear and the black bear are very similar to each other. Panda bear is a little bit different. Okay, and so we're going to separate the panda into a different genus, and the 2 other bears, the grizzly bear and the black bear, both belong to genus Ursus. And then finally, the grizzly bear belongs to a different species than the black bear does. We're going to call that one Ursus arctos. So we went all the way from kingdom through the phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. You do need to know the names of these categories, and you need to know them in order from largest to smallest or smallest to largest. You need to know which categories contain which other ones. And it's really important that you pay attention. This is a time when you get to use your vast memorization skills, because that's the easiest way to remember this. So here's our hierarchy of classification for man. There is a larger category now called domain, and we'll talk about that in the next set of notes. Okay. The domain for man is Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia. So far we're the same as the bears and the fox. Order Primates, that's different. The family is Hominidae, and the genus is Homo sapiens, or H. sapiens is what the way to write it. Okay, Homo sapiens means wise man. The person who came up with this thought we were very wise, and we're not all wise, but that's okay. We go with that. So one easy way to remember when you have a list of things you need to remember in order is something called a mnemonic device. And so you can use this phrase or make up your own if you want to. This phrase would help you. Dear King Philip came over for great steak. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. The one that we learned when I was in high school, when we didn't have the domain as a category, was keep putting cookies out for Girl Scouts. Since Girl Scouts have their own cookies and we now have a domain that we have to name, then we can say don't keep putting cookies out for Girl Scouts, because they have their own cookies, which are very good, by the way, and it is Girl Scout cookie time, and so that's kind of an appropriate time to talk about that. Anyway, that's a phrase you can use to help you remember the names of the categories in order from largest to smallest. Make sure that you memorize that in whatever way is familiar to you, so that you can remember those for future reference.